Hi, everyone. This is Greg Potabom with SecPod, and thanks for joining today's webinar, which is about cyber hygiene automation. We'll go through and discuss what this is about and how to automate different aspects of that. Chandra will be providing the presentation today. Feel free to submit questions that we will answer towards the end of the webinar. And okay, so I think there may be a few more people joining, but I think we should go ahead and get started. Chandra?
All right. Thanks, Greg. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be part of this webinar today. So the topic is cyber hygiene automation. So we'll get into discussing about what is cyber hygiene and how do we automate this entire process of achieving a cyber hygiene practice within the organization. Before starting that, I would like to give a quick introduction to myself. So my name is Chandrasekhar. I am the CEO and founder of SecPod Technologies. So SecPod as a company has been around for the last 10 to 11 years, and so we have been in the information security space, contributed significantly to the open source projects, standards development, and also a good number of products that we are now taking it into the market. So with that, let's come back to the cyber hygiene automation as a topic. I guess I will have to define what is cyber hygiene, although it is a term that has been in use for a while now, but probably not widely known or well-known term. So I would try and give an explanation to what is cyber hygiene. But before doing that, I would like to present some statistics to really bring a case for cyber hygiene. So as you know, endpoints form 90% of any organization's IT assets. So when I say endpoints, it is the desktops, the laptops, the servers, mobile devices which are being used for work purpose now. So if you take all of them, I think about 80 to 90% of these assets are typically the endpoints. Now, another statistics, 80 to 90% of the attacks make use of a vulnerability that is widely published. A vendor has released a patch, but those patches are not really applied onto the systems that are running those vulnerable applications. The systems are not hardened, they're left with default configurations, maybe password policies and things like that are not really hardened. And typically the exploits tend to use these means to firstly exploit a widely open vulnerability and then spread from one system to another system using the misconfigured systems, misconfigured settings. So the reports say that 80 to 90% of the attacks are today making use of these unpatched vulnerabilities. Also, 70% of the attacks are beginning at the endpoints level. I mean, it has become easy for targeting endpoints, maybe with a simple mail with some sort of an attachment and enticing the user to click on those attachments, and the mere action of clicking on this particular attachment would mean exploiting a vulnerability that is already known. So yesterday we released an advisory alerting our customers about spam mail that is exploiting a vulnerability in Microsoft Office. All that the user do is to open that attachment, and there's a flaw in Microsoft Office, a malware or a ransomware gets downloaded onto the system and then spreads from one system to another system. And this has become de facto mode for exploiting or attacking or conducting an attack. And if you look at the statistics of the NIST CVE database, in the last year, in 2018, about 18,000 plus vulnerabilities were added into the CVE database. That averages about 30 to 40 newer vulnerabilities being added into the CVE database on a daily basis. And a significant number of vulnerabilities that never make into the CVE. So that again is almost 60 to 70% of that. So in total, about 30,000 vulnerabilities are being discovered across these operating systems and applications that we tend to use within our enterprise computing environment. And this number is kind of staggering, given that the applications, whether it's Microsoft platform or Linux or Mac OS X or third-party applications that we tend to use on a day-to-day basis, newer vulnerabilities are being discovered on a daily basis, and mitigating these vulnerabilities, again, is a big challenge. So a progressive organization, so when I say progressive organization, an organization which has invested in a patch management and a mitigation tool, takes anywhere between 30 to 120 days to mitigate the vulnerability that was discovered. So it essentially means that if I do a scan today and I get a report, I take about 3 to 5 months to close that vulnerability. But on the other hand, in reality, the vulnerabilities that are published today are being exploited today. So we published another vulnerability report yesterday that was talking about a Dell support application that is installed default on all of the Dell systems is being exploited widely, and a patch is probably made released by the vendor, but those patches are not applied. So it's kind of an easy target for attackers to exploit these type of vulnerabilities and get into the enterprise network and to spread from that one system to another system. Now, another report says that 93% of the cyber attacks cutting across all the industries could actually be prevented with a proper cyber hygiene practice. Now, without defining cyber hygiene, I'm making some kind of a claim that the report is talking about this. So it is really possible to prevent the attack if we follow certain steps or procedures. And that set of procedures is what we call cyber hygiene. So to define cyber hygiene, anything that we do to prevent the possibility of an attack is cyber hygiene. So to explain this in terminologies that we typically use on a day-to-day basis. So the first and most important requirement is having continuous visibility to all the IT assets. So this is one of the fundamental requirements for security. Without visibility, there is no way that we can safeguard any of our IT environment. Then having or performing a risk assessment to know what kind of risks are there, what kind of vulnerabilities are there, misconfigurations are there, etc. And then mitigating those risks again on a continuous basis. And data classification and data loss prevention, continuous monitoring for security monitoring, configuration hardening, which essentially is about hardening some of the settings that are available in each of these devices and operating systems that will help harden the security posture of these systems. And then monitoring for malware exposure, and having a plan for incident response, and additional capabilities like monitoring, file integrity monitoring, etc. So this list possibly can be further extended, add a few more items into this list. But what essentially this brings out is that these are some of the activities that we can do to as part of the cyber hygiene practice to prevent ourselves from being exploited. It essentially means that reducing the attack surface of my organization significantly if I do these procedures religiously. Now, doing these is, of course, not as easy as putting it on a PowerPoint slide. Definitely challenging. So these are some of the problems that are typically faced by the IT security operations team within the organizations. The reason why we fail to put in a proper cyber hygiene practice is because of these concerns and issues. So typically organizations or enterprises invest in large number of tools. For each of the titles that I mentioned here, we end up procuring a point product, one for asset management, another for risk assessment, another for risk mitigation, etc. So the larger the set of tools that we have in our collection, the complex it becomes to manage the whole cybersecurity operation. So firstly, it is about procuring, then there is a deployment that needs to be conducted, and then so getting used to the product and making it really work and effective within my organization, etc. So vendor management is another thing, and then there is a risk of vendor risk assessment, etc. So all of these bring in a lot of complexity for the IT security operations team to ensure that these are being effectively utilized. And secondly, it's about not having visibility to all the IT assets even after investing in some of these tools. And the tool's effectiveness itself, there are a large number of manual processes that are involved, disconnected systems. So if I have to take an example of vulnerability management itself, we invest in a product for vulnerability scanning. It performs a continuous security assessment exercise. And then there is another systems for patching, which does not understand what kind of risks are there and what should be mitigated. So the IT security operations team runs a scan, maybe once in a month or once in a quarter, gets a report that runs into thousands of pages, and then we have to study this report, find out what problems are there and how to mitigate these problems. All of these is a manual procedure, and then push those mitigation through maybe a patch management solution that I have in-house. This is where the time that we were talking about, 3 to 5 months to mitigate the risk, comes from. So because of these disconnected, not so automated systems. So there is a growing gap of vulnerability identification to the mitigation. And even if you were to invest in all of those tools, so each of them end up consuming significant amount of system and network resources, kind of puts us in a back foot, because users want to really work on the tasks that they are supposed to do, but the security systems are taking over the entire system and utilizing or eating away the CPU and the memory power. Another issue is the heterogeneous environment. So it's not just one type of systems that are typically there within the organization. It can be Microsoft platforms, and then you need some server environment, so you may invest in getting some Linux systems. End user computing may run on Mac and Windows, and different types of applications, different types of server environment, etc. So all of these would require different means of managing each of these disparate systems. And also the new age confusion around perimeter with BYOD coming in, large number of workforce working from home or traveling for business reason, etc. So there is no real security perimeter that we can define and go after safeguarding that particular perimeter. And also any of these cyber hygiene related activity or the actions that we take, whether it is rolling out a patch or making certain changes to reduce the attack surface, would require or would need some sort of a downtime, which is kind of a compromise on the availability of the service, and nobody would want to do it. So these are some of the challenges. I'm sure this list can go on to include a good number of other complexities that are felt by the IT security operations team on a day-to-day basis. So what is the solution to this problem? The solution is actually automation to a greater extent. So if there is a system that can provide continuous visibility to all the IT assets, and if it can perform a continuous risk assessment, and it can help mitigate these risks on a continuous basis, and if that entire process can be significantly automated through intelligence augmentation and probably some amount of artificial intelligence coming in, and if it can reduce the amount of time and resources that I would have to spend, I think that would be the platform to look at as far as implementing the cyber hygiene is concerned. Which is what we took that journey of creating a platform that does this, that provides continuous visibility to all the IT assets, no matter where they are, what kind of application softwares and things like that are installed. Then provides continuous risk assessment, identifying vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and any kind of aberrations within the environment. And then a platform that helps me mitigate those risks that we see. So this is what SanerNow as a platform from SecPod provides. Essentially a platform, a single console platform that helps us implement cyber hygiene practice. Now, what does SanerNow bring, which helps us implement or automate all of the tasks that I highlighted in the previous slides? One is provides continuous visibility to all the IT assets, the hardware, the software, the utilization of these software, or their blacklisted applications that are installed by someone, or the unlicensed versions of the applications are there. And even at the granular level, what kind of processes are running, what ports are open, or the services that are running that should not be running, is my antivirus up and running at all times? So these are all visibility requirements for any IT security operations to perform effectively. Secondly, it's about risk assessment. So providing continuous risk assessment capability to identify the vulnerabilities and understanding what is the critical vulnerability, and if there is a way I can mitigate those vulnerabilities. So this has to happen on a continuous basis to know what kind of problems are there. And then mitigation of these vulnerabilities. So through some kind of an automation, if I'm able to roll out the patches or the mitigation that we define to remove those vulnerabilities and risks. So that is the third capability that SanerNow as a platform brings. So I took an example of a Dell support assist software or Microsoft Office vulnerability that is being exploited by through spam. So all of these we can identify on a continuous basis, and I can roll out mitigation to stop that vulnerability being exploited. And fourth, providing continuous compliance to either regulatory standards like PCI, HIPAA, ISO 27001, or GDPR compliance, or technical guidelines like NIST 853 and NIST 800 171, etc. So it's about having the ability to define a benchmark and ensuring that all of my IT systems are adhering to that benchmark at all times, as against an audit-driven approach, which is an annual exercise or a quarterly exercise that is being conducted only to know that there are a large number of deviations that are there, as against identifying the deviations and fixing those deviations on a daily basis through automated means. So that is the fourth capability that SanerNow brings. And then the fifth one is important these days. It has become really overly relevant. The reason why impact analysis is relevant is because if there is an attack going on, and if I have some indicators of a symptom of a particular attack, I need to know if my organization is impacted by that particular, or it can be exploited by that particular attack. So a search console that will allow me to find out the symptoms, and if those symptoms are present within my environment. Even if it is not an attack, if I come to know that there is an adware that is being exploited, and maybe there is a vulnerability or a backdoor in that particular application, I should have, again, a search console to figure out how many systems have that and take action to maybe uninstall that particular software or blacklist that software so that nobody can use it, etc. So this is where the impact analysis capability, what risk hunting or threat hunting capability is really important, which SanerNow brings as a capability, as a tool. And then ability to roll out these really critical patches. One of the things that is most important, really important is, for example, WannaCry or a Meltdown or a Spectre. These are some of the high-profile attacks, well published. We can't wait for patching these. We can't take about 3 or 5 months to patch these vulnerabilities because these are being exploited now. So it is a critical patch that I need to apply or roll out today. So having that ability to identify on a continuous basis that these vulnerabilities are there in my environment and then rolling out those patches immediately is a powerful capability, one of the significant requirement for Cyberhygiene. And then having a consolidated ability to roll out these patches, or rather platform agnostic. So I can't have multiple systems for each of my platforms. For example, one for Microsoft and another for Linux, another for Mac, and then another for third-party application. This will just make it extremely complex to use. So consolidation is really required. So having one console where you can roll out all of these patches for different systems is a valuable tool to have. And then covering the roaming users or the traveling users or people who connect from different networks into this network. So covering those users are also important. Typically, I mean, the earlier approach was whenever these people connect to the home organization, so risk assessment is done and then patch them at that point in time. Again, does not work, or it is a failed strategy. So it's about having that continuous ability to identify the risks and mitigating those risks on a continuous basis. So these are some of the capabilities that SanerNow brings to implement a cyber hygiene practice. So if you want to go back 2 slides, so all of those requirements that I mentioned here, and a good number of these requirements are being addressed through SanerNow platform. File integrity monitoring is an additional capability that we are working on now. Within the next 3 months, we would have that capability coming in into the SanerNow platform. Now SanerNow, little more information on SanerNow. So we have 6 different tools coming in together on a single console, addressed through one single agent. So you have one agent that covers 6 different business needs. This agent works on Microsoft platforms, major distributions of Linux, and Mac OS X. So we have a vulnerability scanner, runs a continuous scanning. Typically, scanning takes about 5 to 10 minutes, irrespective of the number of endpoints that you have. Within about 5 to 10 minutes, you would have visibility to all the risks that are identified. And then a patch management tool that can patch operate all these operating systems and a large list of third-party applications itself. And the whole patching exercise can be automated through some sort of rules that you can create based on certain criteria like criticality, etc. Then we have an asset management tool, provides complete visibility to all the IT assets, the hardware and the software, and utilization of these applications, software, etc. Then an endpoint management tool provides further granular visibility to these IT assets, really knowing what is going on these endpoint systems, what processes are running, what is present in a particular registry, what services are there, what kind of BIOS version, for example, I have, what kind of driver softwares are installed. So all of these are queries that you can just run and get visibility to all to the IT systems activities. And then we have a compliance management tool. This will help one adhere to regulatory standards like PCI or HIPAA, or a technical standard like NIST 853 or 171. So you can define a benchmark, identify the deviations, and then you can fix those deviations to bring the device to a compliant state and actually stay in that state irrespective of your auditing side. And then the sixth tool is the threat hunting capability. It will allow one to build queries to search for indicators of attack and indicators of compromise and respond to those in seconds. So having an incident response capability to either block an attack or contain an attack from spreading. So these are the 6 tools coming together on the SanerNow platforms console. To take some of the use cases where we have deployed in some of our customer environment. So a healthcare organization in the US with 1,400 Windows servers and a few Mac systems. Within a couple of hours of deployment, we were able to identify almost 1 million vulnerabilities, and within a week's time, we were able to bring that vulnerability count to 100K, significantly mitigating all the high-profile vulnerabilities that were widely open. And this entire process could be automated to a daily routine because of the SanerNow platform being there. So likewise, we have deployed in other environments as well, and significantly seeing the value that SanerNow brings. So essentially, to reduce the the attack surface significantly. So with that, I would conclude the session with the slides. I would take about another 10 minutes to give a quick walkthrough of our platform. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to post them there. Towards the end of the session, we will go through all of those questions and respond to each one of them. So let me go to my browser and get onto the demo part. So this is SanerNow platform. So it's a multi-tenant capable platform, which means that you can create multiple sites or client accounts and manage them from a single console. So in this demo, I have 2 different sites, Site X with 4 endpoints. 3 are the Windows and 1 is Linux. So we were talking about 6 different tools. So endpoint management, asset management, vulnerability management, patching, compliance, and an ADR tool. So you see a overview type of an information, like 766 patches need to be rolled out to fix 5,300 vulnerabilities. So there is a relation that this is bringing. Here are the vulnerability, and here are the patches that you can apply to mitigate those vulnerabilities. So this is an overview information. So all the tools have their own dashboard. So these are the 6 tools that we have. So let's look at visibility or continuous visibility as a criteria. The first requirement. So let's see how to address that requirement of Cyberhygiene. So asset management provides visibility to all the IT assets. So this is continuous visibility, real-time visibility. So you have on a day-to-day basis, what is my environment at that point in time. So device distribution, software applications, what kind of hardware are there. So the CPU, the RAM, host name, IP address, MAC address. So all of those information are collected. And so you can add the tags based on locations and things like that. There are additional things that we do, like tracking the licensed applications and operating systems, how many instances are installed, and are there some violations? Are there blacklisted applications that are running, or some of the applications are not being used? And do I have any outdated applications within my environment which are not being supported by the vendor, etc.? So this is coming without any scan being run. So this is an automated thing that is running. So all of the 6 dashboards that you will see are, I mean, the information is put in each of these dashboard with a mere deployment of the agent. So while the agent is deployed, everything else becomes kind of running on an automated basis. So you have asset management. Let's look at the endpoint management tool. This provides further granularity to the activities that are going on. So we have a concept of checks. So we have a large list of checks that are pre-created. So you can click on any of those to know detailed information about that particular check. So open ports, complete list of all the services that are running, what port it is listening on, etc. So we can filter it by defining a scope, maybe a particular group or an individual device. And the interesting thing is that I have an action linked to it. So if this is a process that is not supposed to be running, and this is the port it is listening on, and I want to stop that or block that, I have an action available to me. So I can stop a service or start a service, stop a process by name or ID. So this way, whatever I see, I'll be able to act upon to fix a problem that I see immediately. So there's a good list of these checks that are pre-created. So DNS cache. So one of the attack type is DNS cache poisoning. So some of the DNS entries are mapped to a wrong domain name. So this is a complete list of all those that are fetched from each of the endpoint systems. So if I see a malicious or a malware serving server in this, I would be able to do some cleaning to remove those entries from here. So the visibility is like you click on it and you within a second you have information, and if you want live data, you can submit this query and the agents will start uploading that information back to the server. So if I'm looking at knowing what kind of processes are running, what services are running, administrator users, for example, are there some inactive users that were created long ago and not cleaned up? Are there guest accounts? So all of these are really important visibility requirements from the security point of view. So maybe I would like to see Windows event logs or sys logs from Linux. So all of those are covered as well. And it can also help track the antiviruses, whether it's installed, running, and up-to-date signature database is up-to-date, and active protection component is enabled or not. So these are all checks that are pre-built, and the good thing is that we can add more and more checks into this to cover additional platforms and additional services as well. So asset management and endpoint management together provides visibility to the IT assets. Now we have the visibility on a continuous basis. Let's look at the risk assessment part of it. So vulnerability management tool, again, without any manual intervention, these scans are being done on a daily basis, and the results are up to date. So what you see on the dashboard is an up-to-date information of latest vulnerabilities that were discovered in that environment. So in 4 systems, it found about 5,300 vulnerabilities, and here are the severity distribution of each of those vulnerabilities. Another unique thing that we do is also map these vulnerabilities to a potential exploit or a malware or a ransomware that could use that vulnerability to exploit. So PTR ransomware is one of the high-profile ransomware that made use of a vulnerability which is assigned with this. It used Microsoft Windows SMB V1 vulnerability in V1. So essentially highlighting the need for rolling out the patches for these vulnerabilities most immediately. Then we have additional information, what systems and what applications have the vulnerability, and what are the list of patches that I'll have to install to mitigate these vulnerabilities significantly. So about 200 plus patches if you roll out, you will be able to reduce this to 0. So this is the continuous risk assessment portion of it. There is also a module for compliance management. Again, risk identification portion of it is here. So let's say I want to achieve compliance to NIST 800-171. So we have templates available. Using those templates, you can create a benchmark. So NIST 871 benchmark is there. So you can edit these benchmarks to suit your environment. So each of these NIST 171 requirements are listed here. So you can turn off something or turn on or custom feed your own values and things like that. So once the benchmark is created and applied to a group of systems, so those agents are going to download this benchmark, run a scan, identify the deviations it finds, and then report them here. So this is happening again on a continuous basis or a daily basis. So these are detailed listing of an individual rule that has either failed or passed. A password policy could be an example. So if password length is 12 characters, so you can define those and identify what is the policy that is enabled within a particular environment, and if there are deviations in those. So again, this is part of the risk assessment exercise. So we have two tools, VM and CM, vulnerability management and configuration management or compliance management, to identify the risks on a continuous basis. The one more capability that I talked about as part of the cyber hygiene being an important capability is ability to hunt for a potential symptom of an attack or an indicator of attack or compromise, or even a vulnerability that is widely spread and it is in the news, and I want to see if my systems are impacted. So we have a tool called EDR. So this will allow me to build queries and detect such symptoms or a vulnerability that is being widely exploited. Now let's go to the risk mitigation portion. So the first tool in that is the patch management tool. Of course, significant amount of vulnerabilities can be mitigated through rolling out the patches that are released by the vendors. So this is the dashboard for patch management, device compliance. Almost all of the devices, in fact, require patching. 27% of the applications are up to date, and the 67% or 66% of them are require a patch. So here are the complete list of most critical patches. So the critical patches are directly linked to the exploits in the ransomware that could use these vulnerabilities to exploit. So with a single click, you'll be able to roll out the patches for these systems, those vulnerabilities that are identified in this environment. So this is a full list of all the patches that have to be installed, and each of these patches will mitigate these vulnerabilities that are identified by the CVE. Now, if I have an objective, let's say I want to achieve 90% patch compliance, so this is the visual that shows how many patches need to be installed, or what are those high critical patches that have to be installed to achieve that level of compliance that you would want to achieve. Now, installation of these patches is a pretty simple process. So we have a complete list of all the missing patches. So you can select an individual patch that you want to roll out and then create a task to roll out those patches. While creating that task, you have additional controls like whether I want to reboot a system, do I want to run some scripts as part of the patching activity, and do I have to test a particular patch in a test environment and then only push into a production environment. So all of these are controls that are available to roll out the patch. So you can also schedule the patching to a particular day and time. And we can filter this by groups and individual device, so you can define the patching scope. We also can fix the compliance deviations. Most critical patches are segregated, so you can select all of them and create a patching job. We also track firmware or outdated firmware, so Meltdown and Spectre required this. So we came up with a capability to track all the firmware and update them. Rollback is a feature that will allow one to uninstall a patch if it is causing some trouble within the environment. And then we have an automation capability, which is the most important one. So what this does is we have selected a list of applications that we want to automatically update as and when a vulnerability is identified in those applications. So you can create a rule and define some certain criteria for the rule. And then when you would like to do it, do you want to do it on a daily basis, weekly basis, or a monthly basis, and then define this task. So once this is defined, agents would learn about it and implement the patching as per the schedule. So without any manual intervention, you would be able to apply the patches as and when the vulnerabilities are discovered. So this is one of the important tools as far as risk mitigation is concerned. But not all vulnerabilities are remediated through patching alone. Maybe there are certain vulnerabilities where a vendor has not released a patch, or there are certain configuration issues that require some additional fine-tuning of the system. So those are also possible through SanerNow platform. So if you go to endpoint management, we have a list of actions one could do to further fix additional risks that are identified. So these are array of actions that are available. So you have application and device control. You can block an application or block access to a USB mass storage device, for example. So a complete list of all the devices that are connected, you can create a rule to block them. And we have tune up little. This will allow one to clean junk and temporary downloaded files from the internet, etc., and keep the system clean. Then we have software deployment capability, pretty powerful tool to roll out vulnerability-free, up-to-date software to IT environment. So you can select, these are pre-created applications that we have bundled with products. So you can select any of these and create an installation rule. So all of these applications will be installed on those devices. And you can also create a provision rule. So when you're trying to create or bring up systems, so if you have a rule, with selected list of applications that you want to install. All of those applications will be installed as soon as the Saner agent is deployed on those systems. And you can upload your own executables and MSIs and tar and zip files and deploy them as well. There's another utility is to uninstall an application. So I took an example of an adware with a backdoor. So you can identify those applications and remove them from the environment. So then we have process control, allows you to start, stop, or block access to a process, make changes in the registry entries, or run once is widely used by most of the malware. So you can clean up the entry, check what is there in run once Hive and delete the entries if you see certain malicious entries there. Service control, start or stop or restart services. Network settings could be edited as well. Systems can be rebooted or shut down. File quarantining or deleting a particular file is possible. Cleaning up the startup programs and some of the security settings like the DEP and the SLR, enabling all of those possible through this interface. So these are array of actions that are available in addition to rolling out the patches to address a risk or a potential indicator of attack or compromise to eliminate that particular risk or a threat. So that covers, I think I missed one part, which is the compliance management. So I talked about defining a benchmark and identifying all the deviations, but an interesting capability is mitigating those deviations. So this is a benchmark that we had defined for NIST 171, applied it on a Windows 10 systems. And these are the deviations that are identified, and these are fixes that are available. So I can go ahead and define a rule saying that anytime a deviation is found, go ahead and bring back that deviation back to a compliant state or an expected state. So this way you can achieve continuous compliance to a benchmark that is defined. So that covers all the tools. If we were to go back to the tool listing where I had the requirements for Cyberhygiene, so almost all of these we would be able to cover through SanerNow platform with one single agent and multiple tools and single console approach. There's an additional interesting capability around reports. So we, of course, have some standard reports, but beyond the standard reports, users can build their own report through these list of APIs that are available, or report APIs that are available. So it's just about dragging them onto the canvas and get a complete list of all the vulnerabilities in this case. So if you would like to filter it or convert this into some sort of a chart, so you have a lot of functions that can be performed. So even changing the title and description, for example. So all these are draggable APIs. So let's say, give me a complete list of vulnerable devices. So you have that. All the applications, for example. So these are draggable set of APIs. Now we can plot them into the chart and then export these reports into a PDF or send out an email or save this report for future use. So all of these are possible. You can also apply a filter at the top level to get this reporting only for a particular device or a group of devices as well. So pretty powerful capability. Export is available in the form of a CSV or a PDF. And of course, we have alerts to be sent through email as and when a particular event is identified. Okay, so that covers the demo that I had planned for the SanerNow platform. Now we are open for questions. feel free to post them.
Robert had a question about, seems to be many products that claim endpoint security, and how do we differentiate ourselves? I think there's a lot of different areas. There certainly are plenty of security products on the market, and there's lots of scanning products for vulnerabilities. What we do is we have a suite of tools that work together. So you can do the scans, very simply know what vulnerabilities exist, and then go ahead and patch those through jobs or automation. And then we have other tools that are integrated to manage the endpoints themselves. So all these tools work together. They all have a very simple dashboard interface. And I think it's a combination of these things, the scanning combined with patching, regulatory compliance, configuration checks, that really start differentiating from most other products or more point products. So I think that's a big part of it. I see there's another question from Don. Perhaps Chandra, you would like to address that?
Yeah, so is there a community release that can be used in labs? So a question from Don. Yes, there is a trial version that we have. One could go to SanerNow.com and sign up for a free trial. So this will allow you to deploy on up to 10 systems for a 1-month period and really get all the capabilities that I demonstrated in today's session. There's another question from Don. Can you add baselines such as Microsoft's baseline policy? Yes, so we do have Microsoft baselines available in the form of general compliance that I listed in the, while showing the compliance management tool. And the good part is that each of these are customizable to suit to your environment. So you can define what rules you want to verify and what rules you don't want and what values do you want to check and things like that. So V1 may be enabled or disabled, or password policy should be of this characteristics. So you can define all of them and create a benchmark and assess all of these devices against that baseline. And the important thing is also mitigating those. So we do have GPO policies that can be pushed to bring those devices to compliance or an expected state.
Thank you, Chandra. Do we have additional questions? We're coming up towards to the hour here.
Okay, so another question from Nathan. This is about third-party applications that we cover. So there's a large list of third-party applications that we support in addition to the operating system and platform-specific patches. Those are documented in our SanerNow.com website. So at this point in time, we cover about 100 plus applications, enterprise applications, covering different vendors. Okay. All right, so I don't see any further questions coming in. So we have 4 minutes or so to conclude our session. Feel free to let us know if you have any question. If not, we could conclude this a little early.
Okay, everybody can, you can always go to our SanerNow website. There's a lot of information about the product there and the platform. You can also sign up for free and take a look at it yourself. You can also contact us for more information or setting up a private demo. So we can cover all of that. Is there anything else, Chandra, that we should mention today?
No, other than thanking everyone for being part of this session. Hope there was the session as a whole was useful, and you have something that you want to take back to your organizations and really consider some of these things. So thanks again, once again, for being part of this session.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Okay, have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.